Tonight, a single father with a young daughter will enter the mansion of a billionaire CEO, where she has been locked away for 2 years following her father's death. But as the door closes behind him, he discovers that this seemingly perfect home is quietly crumbling, just like the woman within it. What began as a few simple repairs will become something neither of them can control. Follow my story to the end, hit like, and comment on the city you're viewing so I can see how far this story has progressed. The rain had stopped an hour ago, but Ethan Cole was still finding pieces of his fence scattered across the wet grass. He pulled another splintered board from the hedge that separated his yard from the Thompsons and tossed it onto the growing pile near his driveway. His hands were sore, his jeans soaked through at the knees, and somewhere behind him his daughter was probably getting into something she shouldn't. "Daddy, can I jump in the puddles?" He glanced back toward the porch. Maya stood at the top step in her rain boots, yellow ones covered in ducks, her small hands gripping the railing like she was about to launch herself into orbit. "You can jump in the ones by the grass," he said. "Not the ones near the street." "Okay." She took off immediately, leaping into the nearest puddle with both feet. Water splashed up around her shins and she shrieked with laughter, the kind that made his chest feel lighter, even when everything else felt heavy. Ethan turned back to the fence and crouched down to inspect the post. The storm had hit hard last night, wind like a freight train, rain so thick he couldn't see the house across the street. He'd stood at the window with Maya pressed against his side, watching tree branches whip past and hoping to hell nothing important would break. The fence wasn't important, not really, but fixing it would cost money he didn't have lying around, and that made it just one more thing on a list that never seemed to get shorter. He wiped the rain off his face and stood, stretching his back until it cracked. Across the street, the Hale mansion sat silent and perfect as always, not a shingle out of place, not a leaf on the driveway. It looked like a museum, like nobody actually lived there. Ethan had lived in this neighborhood for 3 years, and he'd seen Vivian Hale maybe twice. Once getting out of a black car in her driveway, another time standing at an upstairs window. He didn't know much about her except what the other neighbors said. Tech CEO, rich as hell, kept to herself. Someone told him she'd lost her father a while back and hadn't been the same since. Someone else said she worked from home now, never went anywhere, had everything delivered. He didn't think much about her, honestly. She was just the woman in the big house who didn't wave. Maya had moved on to a different puddle, this one near the sidewalk. Ethan was about to call her back when he heard a door open across the street. He looked up. Vivian Hale was standing on her front porch. She was still in what looked like pajamas, gray pants, a loose white shirt, and she wasn't wearing shoes. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy knot, and even from across the street, Ethan could see that something was wrong. She wasn't just standing there. She was gripping the porch railing with both hands, staring at him like she'd just seen a car accident. Ethan straightened, suddenly aware of how he must look, wet, muddy, holding a piece of broken fence. Vivian stepped off the porch, barefoot, onto the wet driveway. "Jesus," Ethan muttered. She walked quickly, almost ran, across the street and stopped just short of his yard. Her face was pale, her eyes too wide. She opened her mouth and then closed it again, like she'd forgotten what she was going to say. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked. "I need your help." Her voice was quiet, tight, like she was barely holding it together. Ethan glanced toward Maya, who had stopped jumping and was now staring at the strange woman in the middle of the street. "What's wrong?" Vivian swallowed hard. "There's water in my house, everywhere. I don't know what happened. I heard this sound, and now it won't stop, and I don't—" She stopped, pressed a hand to her forehead. "I don't know what to do." Ethan set the fence board down. "Where's the water coming from?" "The kitchen, I think. Or maybe the basement. I don't—" Her breath hitched. "I'm sorry, I know we don't know each other, but I didn't know who else to ask." She looked like she was about to break apart right there on the pavement. "It's okay," Ethan said. "Just hold on. Let me grab my tools." He turned and jogged up the porch steps. Maya met him at the door, boots dripping. "Who's that?" "The lady from across the street. Her house has a problem, and I'm going to help her fix it. Can I come?" "Not right now, sweetheart. You stay inside and watch your show, okay? I'll be back in a few minutes." Maya's face scrunched up in protest, but Ethan was already moving, grabbing his toolbox from the hallway closet and checking to make sure his phone was in his pocket. When he came back outside, Vivian was standing exactly where he'd left her, arms wrapped around herself, shivering slightly in the cool morning air. "Let's go," he said. She nodded and turned, walking quickly back across the street. Ethan followed, toolbox in hand, trying not to think about the fact that he was about to step inside a house that probably cost more than he'd make in 10 years. The front door was still open. Vivian led him inside and Ethan stopped just past the threshold, momentarily stunned. The house was enormous. High ceilings, white walls, sleek furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. Everything was clean, perfectly arranged, like a photo in a magazine. It didn't look like a place where people lived. It looked like a set. "This way," Vivian said, her voice strained. He followed her through the entryway, past a staircase with glass railings, into a kitchen that was bigger than his entire first floor. And that's where he saw it. Water was pouring out from under the sink, spreading across the white tile floor in a growing pool. It had already soaked the rug in front of the stove and was starting to creep toward the hallway. "Shit," Ethan said. He dropped the toolbox and moved quickly, stepping through the water and crouching down in front of the sink. He yanked open the cabinet doors and was immediately hit with a spray of cold water. The pipe beneath the sink had split clean open, and water was gushing out with enough force that it had already flooded the cabinet and everything inside it. "Do you know where your water shutoff is?" Ethan called over his shoulder. "My what?" "The main water valve, usually in the basement or outside near the foundation." Vivian stared at him, her face blank. "I don't know." "Okay, do you have a basement?" "Yes." "Show me." She moved quickly, leading him back through the kitchen and down a hallway to a door he would have missed entirely. She opened it and flipped a light switch. Stairs descended into darkness. "I haven't been down there in a while," she said quietly. "That's fine, just stay up here." Ethan took the stairs 2 at a time, his boots echoing on the wood. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floors, exposed beams, storage boxes stacked against the walls. He scanned the room quickly and spotted the water heater in the corner. Next to it, mounted on the wall, was the shutoff valve. He grabbed it and twisted hard. The valve resisted for a second, then gave, and he cranked it all the way to the right until it wouldn't turn anymore. Silence. The rushing sound from upstairs stopped. Ethan stood there for a moment, catching his breath, then climbed back up the stairs. Vivian was waiting at the top, her hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles were white. "It's off," Ethan said. "The water's off. You're okay." She exhaled, a shaky, uneven sound, and nodded. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. That pipe is destroyed. I can patch it temporarily, but you're going to need a plumber to replace the whole thing." "I can call someone." "Yeah, but in the meantime, you won't have running water until I get that valve back on." Vivian looked at him, and for the first time he noticed how exhausted she looked. Not just tired, worn down, like she'd been holding something too heavy for too long. "Can you fix it?" she asked. "The pipe, even temporarily." "I can try. I've got some sealant tape in my toolbox. It won't hold forever, but it'll get you through a day or two." "That's fine. She paused. "That's more than I had 5 minutes ago." Ethan nodded and went back into the kitchen. The floor was still covered in water, but at least it wasn't getting worse. He pulled a roll of plumber's tape from his toolbox and crouched back down in front of the sink, ignoring the cold water soaking into his jeans. The pipe was a mess. The split ran almost 4 inches along the seam, and the edges were corroded in a way that told him this hadn't just happened. This had been building for a while. He worked quickly, wrapping the tape around the damaged section as tightly as he could, layering it until the split was covered. It wasn't pretty, but it would hold, probably. When he finished, he stood and wiped his hands on his jeans. "I'm going to turn the water back on. If this doesn't hold, it's going to start leaking again, so keep an eye on it." "Okay." He went back down to the basement, turned the valve, and listened. No rushing water, no hissing. That was a good sign. When he came back upstairs, Vivian was standing in the middle of the kitchen, staring at the water on the floor like she didn't know what to do with it. "You're going to need towels," Ethan said. "A lot of them." She blinked, then nodded. "Right, towels." She disappeared down the hallway and came back a minute later with an armful of white towels that looked too expensive to use for mopping up pipe water. She dropped them on the floor and just stood there, staring at them. Ethan picked one up and started soaking up the water near the cabinet. After a moment, Vivian knelt down and did the same. They worked in silence for a while, wringing out towels and tossing them into a pile by the door. The water was cold, and Ethan's hands were already numb, but he kept going until most of the floor was just damp instead of flooded. When he finally sat back on his heels, Vivian was sitting against the cabinet, her arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the wet floor. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I know I already said that, but I mean it. It's okay. I'm just glad I was outside when you needed help." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, so quietly he almost didn't hear it, "I didn't know who else to call." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. She was younger than he'd thought, maybe his age, maybe a little older, but she looked small sitting there on the floor, like the house was too big for her, like she'd been swallowed up by it. "You don't have family nearby?" he asked. "No." She said it flatly, like the conversation was over. Ethan didn't push. He stood and started gathering the wet towels. "You should call a plumber today. That tape isn't going to last long." "I will." He picked up his toolbox and headed toward the door, but before he could leave, Vivian spoke again. "Can I pay you? For your time?" Ethan stopped. "You don't need to do that." "I want to." "I was already outside. It was 5 minutes." It was more than that. He turned back to look at her. She was standing now, her hands shoved into the pockets of her pajama pants, and there was something almost desperate in the way she was looking at him. Like she needed to give him something, needed the transaction to be complete so she could close the door and go back to whatever it was she did in this huge, silent house. "Keep your money," Ethan said. "But if you want to do something, you could smile at me next time you see me outside. We've been neighbors for 3 years, and I don't think you've ever waved." Vivian's face went red. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be rude." "I'm not saying you were rude, I'm just saying you could wave." She nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll wave." "Good." Ethan left before the conversation could get more awkward. He crossed the street, toolbox banging against his leg, and climbed the steps to his own porch. Maya was pressed against the window, her nose smooshed flat against the glass. He opened the door and she launched herself at him. "What happened? Did you fix it?" "Sort of." "Is the lady okay?" Ethan set the toolbox down and lifted Maya onto his hip. "Yeah, she's okay." "Why was she crying?" "She wasn't crying. She looked like she was going to cry." Ethan didn't have an answer for that. He carried Maya into the kitchen and set her down at the table. "How about some lunch?" "Can we have grilled cheese?" "Sure." He pulled the bread and cheese out of the fridge and got to work, half listening as Maya chattered about the cartoon she'd been watching. But part of his mind was still across the street, still seeing the way Vivian Hale had looked sitting on the floor of her perfect kitchen, soaked and shaking and utterly alone. 3 days later, Ethan was replacing the fence posts when he heard footsteps on the sidewalk. He looked up and saw Vivian walking toward him, moving slowly, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to be there. She was dressed differently this time, jeans, a sweater, actual shoes, but she still looked uncertain, like stepping outside was something she had to think about. "Hi," she said when she reached the edge of his yard. "Hey. I wanted to thank you again for helping me." "You already thanked me." "I know, but I've been thinking about it and I realized I never asked your name." Ethan Cole." "I'm Vivian." "I know." She blinked. "You do?" "People talk." "Right." She shifted her weight, glanced back at her house, then at him again. "I called a plumber. He came out yesterday. He said if you hadn't shut off the water when you did, the whole kitchen would have flooded. Maybe the hallway too." Ethan shrugged. "It wasn't that complicated. It was to me." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and went back to hammering the post into the ground. He figured she'd leave, but she didn't. She just stood there, watching him work. After a minute, she spoke again. "Your daughter, the one who was jumping in the puddles. How old is she?" 6. "She's very cute." "Thanks. What's her name?" "Maya." Vivian smiled, just a little. "That's a pretty name." Ethan stopped hammering and looked up at her. She was staring at the fence, her hands shoved into her pockets, and he got the sense that she wasn't just here to say thank you. She was here because she didn't want to go back inside. Do you need something else fixed? He asked. Vivian looked startled. What? No, I mean, she hesitated. Actually, yes. Maybe. I don't know. Ethan waited. There's a step on my back porch that's rotting through, she said, and one of the shutters is hanging loose, and I think there's a leak in the roof over the guest bedroom, but I'm not sure. I haven't actually gone in there to check. Why not? I don't really use that part of the house. Ethan stood and wiped the dirt off his hands. You want me to take a look? I can pay you this time, a real amount, whatever you think is fair. He thought about it. He thought about the fence posts he still needed to buy, the ballet classes Maya wanted to take, the transmission in his truck that was making a noise he didn't like. He thought about all of it, and then he thought about Vivian Hale standing barefoot in the rain, looking like her whole world was falling apart. I'll take a look, he said, but I'm not making any promises. I'm a contractor, not a miracle worker. That's fine, I'm not expecting miracles. When do you want me to come by? Whenever you have time. Ethan glanced back at his house. Maya was inside watching a movie, and he had maybe an hour before he needed to start dinner. I can do it now if you want. Really? Yeah, let me just tell Maya where I'm going. He jogged inside, told Maya he'd be across the street for a little while, and came back out to find Vivian waiting at the end of his driveway. They walked across the street together, not talking, and when they reached her front door, she hesitated before opening it. I should warn you, she said. The house is a mess. Ethan almost laughed. He'd seen the inside. It was the least messy house he'd ever been in, but he didn't say that. He just nodded and followed her inside. She led him through the kitchen. The floor was dry now, no sign of the flood, and out a back door onto a porch that overlooked a massive backyard. The yard was beautiful, perfectly landscaped, but it had the same untouched quality as the house, like no one had set foot in it in months. Vivian pointed at the third step down. That one. It feels soft when you step on it. Ethan crouched down and pressed his hand against the wood. It gave slightly under the pressure, and when he looked closer, he could see the edges starting to rot. Yeah, this needs to be replaced. Can you do it? Yeah, I'll need to get some lumber, but it's not a big job. Okay, what else? He spent the next 20 minutes walking around the outside of the house, checking the shutters, inspecting the roofline, looking for anything that seemed off. Most of it was minor, a loose hinge here, a missing nail there. But when he climbed up onto the back porch roof to check the guest bedroom window, he found a small crack in the flashing that had been letting water seep in. When he climbed back down, Vivian was standing in the yard, arms crossed, watching him. The roof's got a leak, he said. It's small, but it'll get worse if you don't fix it. Can you fix it? Yeah, but I'll need to order some materials, and I'll need access to the attic to check if there's any water damage inside. Vivian nodded slowly. Okay. It's going to take a few days, maybe a week, depending on how bad it is. That's fine. Ethan climbed down from the roof and landed on the grass beside her. I'll put together a list of what I need and get you an estimate. You don't have to do that. I'm not going to charge you without telling you how much it's going to cost. I don't care how much it costs. Ethan stopped and looked at her. You should. Why? Because that's how this works. I tell you what it'll cost. You decide if you want me to do it. That's the deal. Vivian's jaw tightened. For a second he thought she was going to argue, but then she just nodded. Fine. Send me the estimate. I will. They stood there for a moment, the afternoon sun filtering through the trees, and Ethan realized this was the longest conversation he'd ever had with her. She was different than he'd expected. Not cold exactly, just closed off, like she'd built walls so high she'd forgotten how to let people in. Can I ask you something? Vivian said suddenly. Sure. Why are you helping me? Ethan frowned. What do you mean? I mean, you don't know me. We've never spoken before last week. You have your own life, your own problems. So why are you spending your time fixing my house? Because you asked. That's it? That's it. Vivian stared at him like she didn't believe him, like there had to be some other reason, some angle he was working, but there wasn't. It was just the truth. I should go, Ethan said. I need to get dinner started. Right, of course. He started toward the front of the house, but before he rounded the corner, Vivian called after him. Ethan. He turned. Thank you. He nodded. You already said that. I know, but I'll probably say it again. This time, Ethan smiled, just a little. That's okay. I don't mind. The estimate took him 2 days to put together. He wasn't great with numbers, never had been, but he went through it 3 times to make sure he wasn't overcharging or undercharging. When he finally had a number he felt good about, he walked across the street and knocked on Vivian's door. She answered quickly, like she'd been waiting. "I've got your estimate," Ethan said, holding out the piece of paper. Vivian took it, glanced at the number, and handed it back. "That's fine. You didn't even read it." "I don't need to. Vivian, I trust you." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. He barely knew her. She barely knew him. But there was something in the way she said it, something quiet and certain, that made him believe she meant it. "All right," he said. "I'll start tomorrow." "Okay. I'll probably be here most of the day. Is that all right?" "That's fine. I work from home, so I'll be around if you need anything." Ethan nodded and turned to leave, but Vivian stopped him again. "Can I ask you something else?" "Sure." "Your daughter, Maya, does she go to school during the day?" "Yeah, she's in 1st grade." "So you're alone during the day?" "Most of the time, yeah." Vivian hesitated. "If you ever need someone to watch her, after school, I mean, or if you have to work late, I could—" She stopped, looked down. "I'm not saying I'm good with kids. I've never really spent time around them. But if you ever needed help, I'd be willing to try." Ethan stared at her, caught off guard. That's really nice of you, but I've got it covered. My neighbor Sue watches her a couple days a week, and the rest of the time I just bring her with me to jobs." "Okay, I just thought I'd offer." "I appreciate it." Vivian nodded, and this time when Ethan left, she didn't call him back. He started work the next morning, arriving just after 9, with his truck loaded down with lumber, tools, and a ladder. Vivian answered the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt, her hair damp like she'd just showered. "You can go around back," she said. "I'll unlock the gate." Ethan carried his tools through the side yard and into the back, where Vivian was already waiting on the porch. She looked nervous, like she wasn't sure what to do with herself. "I'll be upstairs working," she said. If you need anything, just knock." "Sounds good." She disappeared inside and Ethan got to work. He started with the porch step, prying up the rotted wood and replacing it with fresh lumber. It was mindless, physical work, the kind he was good at, and he lost himself in the rhythm of it, measuring, cutting, hammering, sanding. Around noon, the back door opened and Vivian stepped out, carrying a glass of water. "I thought you might be thirsty," she said. Ethan straightened and wiped the sweat off his forehead. "Thanks." He took the glass and drank half of it in one go. Vivian sat down on the top step, her arms wrapped around her knees, watching him work. "You're fast," she said. "I've done this a lot. How long have you been a contractor?" "About 10 years. I worked construction before that." "Do you like it?" Ethan set the glass down and picked up his hammer. "Most days." "What about the other days?" "The other days I wonder why I didn't go to college." Vivian smiled, just a little. "I went to college. It didn't make anything easier." "What'd you study?" "Computer science, then an MBA. And now you run a tech company." "I do. That's impressive." Vivian didn't say anything. She just stared out at the yard, her expression unreadable. "Do you like it?" Ethan asked. "I used to." "What changed?" She was quiet for a long time. Then, so quietly, he almost didn't hear. "Everything." Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he just went back to work. After a few minutes, Vivian stood and went back inside without another word. The days started to blur together. Ethan would show up in the morning, work until mid-afternoon, then head home to pick Maya up from school. Some days Vivian would come outside and sit on the porch watching him work. Other days she'd stay inside and he wouldn't see her at all. But even when she wasn't there, Ethan started to notice things. The house was too quiet. No music, no TV, no sounds of life. Just silence. The curtains were always drawn. There was no food in the trash, no takeout containers, no delivery boxes. He didn't know what she was eating, or if she was eating at all. And every time he saw her, she looked a little more tired. One afternoon, about a week into the job, Ethan was up on the roof fixing the flashing when he heard a crash from inside the house. He froze, listening, and then he heard it again, something heavy hitting the floor. He climbed down as fast as he could and ran to the back door. "Vivian?" No answer. He tried the door. Locked. "Vivian, are you okay?" Still nothing. Ethan's heart was pounding now. He ran around to the front of the house and tried the front door. Also locked. He was about to kick it in when it swung open and Vivian stood there, pale and shaking. "I'm fine," she said. "What happened?" I knocked over a lamp. It's fine." But she didn't look fine. She looked like she was about to pass out. "When's the last time you ate?" Ethan asked. "I don't know. This morning." "Vivian." "I said I'm fine." She started to close the door, but Ethan put his hand out to stop it. "Let me make you something." "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't, but I'm going to anyway." For a moment he thought she was going to slam the door in his face, but then her shoulders sagged and she stepped back, letting him inside. Ethan walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge. It was almost empty. A carton of milk, a container of yogurt, some wilted lettuce. That was it. He closed the fridge and turned to look at Vivian, who was standing in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself. "When's the last time you went to the grocery store?" he asked. "I don't know." "Vivian, I have things delivered." "When?" She didn't answer. Ethan pulled out his phone and opened a food delivery app. "What do you want to eat?" "I'm not hungry." "I don't care. Pick something." She stared at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, he saw something crack. Just a little. Just enough. "Soup," she said quietly. "I like soup." Ethan ordered 2 containers of soup, a sandwich, and some bread, and paid for it before she could argue. Then he sat down at the kitchen table and waited. Vivian sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap, staring at the table. "You don't have to stay," she said. "I know. I'm not your responsibility." "I know that too." She looked up at him and her eyes were wet. "Then why are you here?" "Because someone should be." Vivian's breath hitched and she looked away quickly, like she didn't want him to see her cry. But it was too late. He'd already seen it. They sat in silence until the food arrived. Ethan answered the door, brought the bag inside, and set it on the table. Vivian opened the soup and stared at it like she didn't know what to do. "Eat," Ethan said. She picked up the spoon and took a small bite, then another. And then she ate the whole thing without stopping. When she finished, she set the spoon down and covered her face with her hands. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice muffled. "I don't know what's wrong with me." "There's nothing wrong with you." "Yes, there is." Ethan leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "Vivian, look at me." She lowered her hand slowly. "You're not broken," he said. "You're just tired, and that's okay. But you can't keep doing this. You can't keep living in this house like a ghost." "I don't know how to do anything else." "Then let me help you." She shook her head. "You're already helping me." "I'm fixing your house. That's not the same thing." Vivian stared at him, and for the first time he saw something other than fear in her eyes. He saw hope. Just a flicker of it. But it was there. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, okay. Help me." Ethan nodded. "All right. We'll start small." The next day, Ethan showed up with Maya. Vivian opened the door and froze when she saw the little girl standing beside him, holding his hand. "I hope this is okay," Ethan said. "Sue's out of town, and I didn't want to cancel." "It's fine," Vivian said quickly. "Of course it's fine." Maya looked up at Vivian with wide eyes. "Are you the lady with the big house?" "I am. It's really big." "It is." Maya grinned. "Can I see inside?" Vivian glanced at Ethan, who just shrugged. "If it's okay with you." "It's okay." Vivian stepped back and let them inside. Maya immediately ran to the staircase and stared up at the glass railings. "Daddy, look! It's like a castle." Ethan smiled. "Don't touch anything, okay?" "Okay." Vivian watched as Maya wandered through the entryway, her small hands trailing along the walls, her eyes wide with wonder. And for the first time since Ethan had met her, Vivian smiled, really smiled. "She's sweet," Vivian said. "She's a handful. I think she's perfect." Ethan looked at her and something in his chest tightened. Because in that moment, standing in the doorway of her big empty house, Vivian didn't look like a CEO or a recluse or someone who had the world figured out. She just looked like a person who wanted to be part of something again. And Ethan decided right then that he was going to help her find it. Over the next 2 weeks, Maya became a regular fixture at Vivian's house. She would sit on the back porch steps, coloring in her notebook while Ethan worked, occasionally wandering over to show Vivian her drawings. At first, Vivian didn't know what to do with the attention. She would nod politely, say something like, "That's very nice," and then retreat back inside. But Maya was persistent in the way only 6-year-olds can be, and eventually Vivian stopped retreating. One afternoon, Maya dragged a lawn chair across the porch and set it up right next to where Vivian was sitting. "I'm going to sit with you," Maya announced. Vivian blinked. "Oh, okay." Maya climbed into the chair, her legs dangling off the edge, and pulled out her coloring book. For a few minutes they sat in silence, the only sound the scrape of Maya's crayon against paper and the distant hammering of Ethan fixing the gutter. Then Maya looked up. "Do you have any kids?" "No," Vivian said. "Why not?" "Maya," Ethan called from the ladder. "That's not a polite question." "It's okay," Vivian said quietly. She looked down at Maya, who was staring at her with open curiosity, no judgment in her face at all. "I just never did." "Do you want kids?" Vivian hesitated. "I don't know. I never really thought about it." "You should get some. They're fun." "Are they?" "Yeah, I mean, sometimes I get in trouble, but mostly I'm fun." Vivian smiled despite herself. "I believe you." Maya went back to coloring, and Vivian watched her for a moment, this small person who had walked into her life without asking permission and somehow made the house feel less empty. "What are you drawing?" Vivian asked. Maya held up the page. It was a picture of a house, Vivian's house, judging by the size, with 3 stick figures standing in front of it, one tall, one medium, one small. "That's you," Maya said, pointing to the tall figure. "And that's my dad. And that's me. It's very good. Do you want it?" Vivian's throat tightened. "You want to give it to me?" "Yeah, you can put it on your fridge." "I'd like that, thank you." Maya beamed and went back to her coloring book, already starting on the next picture. Vivian folded the drawing carefully and set it on the table beside her, and when Ethan came down from the ladder an hour later, he found it still sitting there, like Vivian had been afraid to move it. That night, after Ethan and Maya had gone home, Vivian walked into her kitchen and opened the refrigerator. It was still mostly empty, but she pulled out a magnet, one she'd gotten years ago from some corporate event she couldn't even remember, and pinned Maya's drawing to the door. It was the first personal thing that had been in this house in 2 years. The next morning, Vivian came downstairs and stopped in the kitchen doorway, staring at the drawing like she'd forgotten it was there. Then she made herself a cup of coffee, sat down at the table, and looked at it for a long time. When Ethan arrived an hour later, she was still sitting there. He knocked on the back door and she startled, nearly spilling her coffee. She got up quickly and let him in, and he noticed immediately that something was different. She wasn't in pajamas. She was dressed in jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back, and there was color in her face that hadn't been there before. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine. She gestured vaguely at the drawing on the fridge. "I was looking at that." Ethan smiled. "She'll make you 100 more if you let her." "I don't mind." He set his toolbox down and glanced around the kitchen. "I'm going to start on the roof today. It's going to be loud." "That's fine. If it gets too bad, just let me know." Vivian nodded and Ethan headed outside. But as he climbed up onto the roof and started pulling off the damaged shingles, he kept thinking about the way Vivian had looked at that drawing, like it was the most important thing in the world. By mid-afternoon, he'd made good progress. The old flashing was off, the damaged shingles were gone, and he was just starting to lay down the new ones when he heard the back door open. He looked down and saw Vivian standing on the porch, holding a plate. "I made sandwiches," she called up. "I thought you might be hungry." Ethan climbed down the ladder and wiped his hands on his jeans. "You didn't have to do that." "I know, but I wanted to." She handed him the plate. 2 sandwiches, cut neatly in half, with chips on the side. And he realized this was the first time she'd offered him anything other than water. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome." She turned to go back inside, but Ethan stopped her. "Vivian." She looked back. "Do you want to eat with me?" She hesitated, and for a second he thought she was going to say no. But then she nodded. Okay. They sat on the porch steps side by side, eating in comfortable silence. The sun was warm and the yard was quiet except for the sound of birds in the trees. It was the kind of peaceful moment Ethan hadn't had in a long time, and he got the sense that Vivian hadn't either. "Can I ask you something?" Vivian said after a while. "Sure." "Why are you a single parent, if you don't mind me asking?" Ethan took a bite of his sandwich and chewed slowly, buying himself time. It wasn't a question he liked answering, but Vivian had been honest with him, and he figured he owed her the same. "Maya's mom left when she was 2, he said. Just packed a bag one day and didn't come back." Vivian's face went still. "I'm sorry." "It's okay. It was a long time ago." "Do you ever hear from her?" "No. She signed away her rights about a year after she left. Said she wasn't cut out to be a mother." He set the sandwich down and stared out at the yard. "I was angry for a long time. At her, at myself, at the whole situation. But then I realized Maya didn't need me to be angry. She needed me to be there. So that's what I've been trying to do." Vivian was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're a good father." "I'm trying." "That's more than a lot of people do." Ethan looked at her, and he saw something in her face he hadn't seen before. Not pity, understanding. "What about you?" he asked. "You said you lost your dad." Vivian's whole body tensed. "I did." "When?" 2 years ago. Heart attack. He was fine one day and gone the next." "That's rough." It was. She picked at the edge of her sandwich, not eating it. "He was the only family I had. My mom died when I was young, and I don't have any siblings. So when he died, it was just me." "Is that when you stopped going out?" Vivian looked at him sharply. "How did you know that?" "I've lived across the street for 3 years. I noticed things." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I couldn't do it anymore. Going to the office, pretending everything was fine, smiling at people who didn't actually care. It felt like I was suffocating, so I stopped. I moved everything online, stopped leaving the house, and told myself it was temporary. But then weeks turned into months, and months turned into years, and I just stayed." "What about friends?" "I don't really have friends. I have colleagues, people I work with, but nobody I actually talk to." "That sounds lonely." "It is." She said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, that it hit Ethan harder than if she'd cried. "But it's easier than the alternative." "Which is?" "Letting people in and then losing them." Ethan didn't have an answer for that. He understood it too well. The fear of losing someone. The temptation to just lock yourself away where nothing could hurt you. He'd felt it himself after Maya's mom left. The difference was, he'd had Maya. He couldn't lock himself away because she needed him. But Vivian didn't have anyone. Until now. "You're not alone anymore," Ethan said quietly. Vivian looked at him, her eyes wet. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "This. Let people in. I've been by myself for so long, I don't even know where to start." "You start small. You let Maya draw you pictures. You make me sandwiches. You sit on the porch and eat lunch. That's how you start." Vivian nodded slowly, and Ethan could see her trying to believe him. "Okay," she said. "I can do that." "Good." They finished eating and Ethan went back to work. But something had shifted between them. The wall Vivian had built around herself had cracked just a little bit more, and Ethan could see the person underneath, the one who was scared and grieving and desperate for connection, but didn't know how to ask for it. Over the next few days, the cracks got wider. Vivian started coming outside more often, sitting on the porch while Ethan worked. Sometimes she'd bring her laptop and answer emails, but mostly she just sat there watching him. And sometimes she'd talk. She told him about her company, a software firm that developed cybersecurity tools for hospitals and government agencies. She'd started it with her father 10 years ago, back when it was just the two of them working out of a cramped office downtown. Now it employed over 200 people and brought in millions in revenue every year. "Do you still like the work?" Ethan asked one afternoon. "I used to love it," Vivian said. "When it was small, when it felt like we were building something that mattered. But now it's just numbers. Profit margins, shareholder expectations. It doesn't feel like mine anymore." "So why do you keep doing it?" "Because it's what my father would have wanted. He built this company from nothing. I can't just walk away from it." Even if it's making you miserable? Vivian didn't answer. Ethan climbed down from the roof and sat beside her on the porch. Can I tell you something? Sure. Your dad loved you, right? Yes. Then he wouldn't want you to be miserable. He'd want you to be happy. Vivian's jaw tightened. You didn't know him. You're right. I didn't, but I know what it's like to love someone. And if I died tomorrow, the last thing I'd want is for Maya to spend the rest of her life doing something she hated just because she thought it's what I would have wanted. Vivian looked away, and Ethan could see her blinking back tears. I don't know how to let it go, she said quietly. You don't have to let it go. You just have to make it yours again. She turned to look at them, and for a moment neither of them said anything. Then Vivian nodded, just once, and Ethan knew she'd heard him. That weekend, Ethan didn't come by. It was Maya's birthday, and he'd promised her a day at the zoo, followed by cake and pizza with a few of her friends from school. He texted Vivian to let her know he wouldn't be there, and she replied with a simple, "Have fun." But on Sunday evening, long after the party was over and Maya was asleep upstairs, Ethan heard a knock at his door. He opened it and found Vivian standing on his porch, holding a wrapped box. I know I should have called, she said quickly, but I saw your text about Maya's birthday, and I wanted to give her this. Ethan looked down at the box. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. He took the box and felt the weight of it. What is it? Just open it. If it's weird, you can tell me. I won't be offended. Ethan pulled off the wrapping paper and opened the box. Inside was a set of oil pastels, the expensive kind, along with a large sketchbook and a wooden case to keep everything organized. Maya mentioned she likes to draw, Vivian said, her voice uncertain. And I thought, I don't know, maybe she'd like these. Ethan stared down at the gift, his throat tight. This is really generous. Is it too much? I wasn't sure what to get a 6-year-old. It's perfect. She's going to love it. Vivian's face relaxed into a small smile. Good. I'm glad. They stood there for a moment, and then Ethan stepped back. Do you want to come in? I was just about to make some coffee. Vivian hesitated, and Ethan could see the war happening behind her eyes. The part of her that wanted to say yes, and the part of her that was still afraid. Okay, she said, finally. Just for a little while. She stepped inside, and Ethan closed the door behind her. The house was small and cluttered compared to hers, toys scattered across the living room floor, dishes in the sink, a stack of bills on the kitchen table. But Vivian didn't seem to notice. She just stood in the entryway, looking around like she was trying to memorize it. It's cozy, she said. That's a nice way of saying it's a mess. No, I mean it. It feels like a home. Ethan poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to her. They sat at the kitchen table, and for a while they just talked. About nothing important. About the weather, about a movie Maya had wanted to watch, about the restaurant down the street that made the best Thai food. It was easy, comfortable. And when Vivian finally stood to leave an hour later, Ethan realized he didn't want her to go. Thank you for the coffee, Vivian said at the door. Thank you for the gift. Maya's going to flip out when she sees it. Vivian smiled. Let me know what she thinks. I will. She started down the porch steps, then stopped and turned back. Ethan. Yeah? I had a good time tonight. Me too. She nodded, and this time when she left, she didn't look back. The next morning, Maya opened the gift and screamed so loud Ethan thought something was wrong. But when he ran into the living room, she was jumping up and down, clutching the box of pastels like it was made of gold. Daddy, look! Look what she got me! I see it, sweetheart. Can I use them right now? After breakfast. Maya groaned but set the box down carefully on the table and ran to get her cereal. Ethan pulled out his phone and texted Vivian. You made her day. She's already planning her first masterpiece. A few minutes later, Vivian replied, I'm glad. Tell her I can't wait to see it. When Ethan and Maya showed up at Vivian's house later that morning, Maya was carrying the sketchbook under one arm and the box of pastels under the other. I'm going to draw you a picture, Maya announced the second Vivian opened the door. You are? Yep, a big one. Vivian stepped aside to let them in, and Maya immediately set up camp on the kitchen floor, spreading out her supplies like a tiny artist preparing for a gallery show. Ethan got to work on the last of the repairs, a section of the back deck that had started to splinter, and Vivian sat at the kitchen table, pretending to work on her laptop, but really just watching Maya draw. After about an hour, Maya held up her picture. Done. Vivian leaned forward. Can I see? Maya carried it over and set it on the table. It was a drawing of a garden, full of bright flowers and green grass, and a big tree in the middle. At the bottom, in careful letters, Maya had written, "For Vivian's yard." Vivian stared at it for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice was thick. "This is beautiful, Maya. Do you like it?" "I love it." "You should make your yard look like this. It would be so pretty." Vivian glanced out the window at her backyard, perfectly maintained, perfectly empty. "I don't know anything about gardening." "My dad does. He can help you." Ethan, who had been listening from the doorway, raised an eyebrow. "I can?" "Can't you?" Vivian asked. "I mean, I know the basics, but I've never done a whole garden." "Neither have I," Vivian said. "So we'd be learning together." Ethan looked at her, and something in his chest shifted. "You really want to do this?" "I think I do." "All right then, let's do it." Maya cheered, and Vivian smiled, really smiled, and Ethan realized that somewhere along the way, fixing Vivian's house had turned into something else entirely. They started planning the garden that afternoon. Maya sat between them at the kitchen table, pointing at pictures in a gardening book Vivian had ordered online, while Ethan sketched out a rough layout on a piece of paper. "I want roses," Maya said. "Roses are hard to grow," Ethan said, "but they're pretty." "She's right," Vivian said. "They are pretty." Ethan sighed. "Fine, we'll try roses." They spent the next 2 hours going back and forth, Vivian suggesting flowers she liked, Ethan explaining which ones would actually survive in Seattle's climate, and Maya insisting they needed a bird bath because birds need water too, Daddy. By the time they finished, the plan was ambitious. Flower beds along the fence, a stone path leading to a small seating area, climbing vines on the back porch, and yes, a bird bath in the center. "This is going to take a while," Ethan said, looking at the sketch. "I don't mind," Vivian said. "I've got time." The next week, they started clearing the yard. Ethan rented a tiller and spent 2 days breaking up the hard-packed soil, while Vivian and Maya pulled weeds and raked debris. It was messy, exhausting work, and by the end of the first day, all 3 of them were covered in dirt. "I look disgusting," Vivian said, staring down at her mud-streaked jeans. "You look like you've been working," Ethan said. "I haven't worked like this in years." "How does it feel?" Vivian paused, considering. "Good, it feels good." Maya, who had been digging in the dirt with a small shovel, looked up. "Can we plant the flowers now?" "Not yet," Ethan said. "We have to get the soil ready first." "That's boring." "I know, but it's important." Maya groaned and went back to digging, and Vivian laughed, a real genuine laugh that startled even her. "What?" Ethan asked. "Nothing. I can't remember the last time I laughed like that." "You should do it more often." "Maybe I will." Over the next 2 weeks, the garden started to take shape. They planted lavender along the fence, daisies near the porch, and a row of sunflowers that Maya insisted would grow as tall as the house. Ethan built raised beds for the vegetables Vivian wanted to try growing, and Maya helped paint the bird bath a bright, cheerful blue. Every evening after the work was done, the 3 of them would sit on the back porch and admire what they'd accomplished. It wasn't finished yet, not even close, but it was starting to look like something. "I never thought I'd have a garden," Vivian said one evening. "Why not?" Ethan asked. "I don't know. It just seemed like something other people did. People who had time, who weren't always working." "You're not always working anymore." Vivian looked at him. "No, I guess I'm not." There was something in her voice, something soft and tentative, and Ethan felt the air between them shift. "Vivian?" He started, but before he could finish, Maya came running out of the house. "Daddy, I'm hungry." The moment broke. "All right," Ethan said, standing. "Let's get you some dinner." They packed up the tools and headed inside, and Vivian watched them go, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt like she was part of something. That night, after Ethan and Maya had gone home, Vivian stood at her kitchen window and looked out at the garden. It was dark, but she could still see the outlines of the flower beds, the path they'd started to lay, the bird bath catching the moonlight. And for the first time in 2 years, her house didn't feel empty. A few days later, Vivian got a phone call. She was outside with Ethan, helping him spread mulch around the new flower beds, when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, saw the name on the screen, and her whole body went rigid. "I need to take this," she said. Ethan looked up. "Everything okay?" "It's my mother." She walked into the house before he could respond and answered the call. "Hello, Mother." "Vivian, finally. I've been trying to reach you for days." "I've been busy." "Busy with what? You work from home." Vivian closed her eyes and counted to 3. "What do you need?" "I'm coming to Seattle next week. We need to discuss the company." "There's nothing to discuss." "There's plenty to discuss. Your board is concerned about your lack of presence. You haven't attended a single meeting in person in over a year." "I attend them virtually." "That's not the same, and you know it. You're the CEO, Vivian. You need to act like it." "I am acting like it. The company is doing fine." "Fine isn't good enough. Your father built that company to be great. You're letting it stagnate." Vivian's jaw tightened. "Don't bring him into this." "Why not? He'd be ashamed of what you've become." The words hit like a slap, and for a moment Vivian couldn't breathe. "I'll see you next week," her mother said, and hung up. Vivian stood there, phone in hand, shaking. She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw the phone across the room, but instead she just stood there, frozen, until she heard footsteps behind her. "Vivian?" She turned and saw Ethan standing in the doorway, concern written all over his face. "I'm fine," she said automatically. "You don't look fine." "I said I'm fine." But her voice cracked on the last word, and before she could stop herself, she was crying. Ethan crossed the room in 3 steps and pulled her into his arms. Vivian stiffened, her whole body going tense, but he didn't let go. He just held her, steady and solid, until she finally stopped fighting it and let herself break. She cried for a long time, for her father, for the loneliness, for the years she'd spent hiding in this house. And when she finally pulled back, her face red and her eyes swollen, Ethan was still there. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping at her eyes. "Don't be. I don't usually fall apart like that." "Maybe you should more often." Vivian let out a shaky laugh. "My mother would love that." "Your mother sounds like a piece of work." "She is." Ethan guided her to the couch and sat down beside her. "You want to talk about it?" Vivian shook her head. "Not really." "Okay." They sat in silence for a while, and then Vivian said, "She's coming here next week to lecture me about the company. Are you going to let her?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to tell her to go to hell, but the other part—" She trailed off. "The other part still wants her approval." Vivian looked at him, surprised. "How did you know?" "Because I spent 2 years trying to get my ex to come back, even after she made it clear she didn't want to be a mother. I kept thinking if I just tried harder, if I just did things differently, she'd change her mind. But she didn't, and eventually I realized I didn't need her approval. I just needed to do right by Maya." "That's different." "Is it?" Vivian didn't have an answer for that. "You don't owe your mother anything," Ethan said gently. "Not your time, not your energy, and definitely not your happiness." "She's still my mother." "I know, but that doesn't mean you have to let her control your life." Vivian stared down at her hands, and when she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know who I am without the company, without her expectations. I've been trying to be what she wants for so long, I forgot what I wanted. So figure it out." "How?" "Start by asking yourself what makes you happy." Vivian thought about it, and the first thing that came to mind was sitting on the back porch with Ethan and Maya, dirt under her nails, laughing about nothing. "This," she said quietly, "this makes me happy." Ethan smiled. "Then that's a pretty good place to start." The week before Vivian's mother arrived, something changed between them. Ethan couldn't put his finger on exactly when it happened, but suddenly every conversation felt heavier. Every accidental touch lasted a second too long, and the silence between them wasn't comfortable anymore. It was charged. They were in the garden one afternoon, Vivian on her knees pulling weeds while Ethan adjusted the stones along the path, when Maya announced she needed to use the bathroom. "Go ahead," Ethan said without looking up. "You know where it is." Maya ran inside, and for the first time in weeks, Ethan and Vivian were alone. Vivian sat back on her heels and wiped the sweat from her forehead, leaving a streak of dirt across her temple. Her hair had fallen out of its ponytail, and her shirt was stained with grass and mud. She looked nothing like the polished CEO he'd seen in photos online. She looked real. "What?" she asked, catching him staring. "Nothing. You're looking at me weird." "I'm not looking at you weird." "Yes, you are." Ethan smiled despite himself. "Fine. I was just thinking you look different than when I first met you." "Different how?" "Happier." Vivian's heat was stilled in the dirt. "I am happier." "Good." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something passed between them that made Ethan's chest tighten. "Ethan, I know. You don't know what I was going to say." "Yeah, I do." Vivian stood up and brushed the dirt off her jeans, her movements jerky and uncertain. "This is a bad idea." "What is?" "This, whatever this is." "I'm not doing anything." "You're looking at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you want to kiss me." The words hung in the air between them, and Ethan didn't deny it because he couldn't. She was right. "Would that be so terrible?" he asked quietly. "Yes, because you work for me. I'm fixing your house. That's not the same thing. And you have a daughter, and I don't know how to do this, any of this." "Neither do I." "Then we should stop before it gets complicated." "Vivian, it's already complicated." She stared at him, her jaw tight, and for a moment he thought she was going to tell him to leave and never come back. But then Maya came barreling out of the house, completely oblivious to the tension crackling between them. "Can we plant the roses now?" Maya asked. "Not yet, sweetheart," Ethan said, his voice rougher than he intended. "But you said soon." "I know. And it will be soon. Just not today." Maya pouted but didn't argue, and Vivian used the interruption to retreat into the house without another word. Ethan watched her go, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, and wondered how the hell he was supposed to walk away from this. That night he couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the conversation in his head, the way Vivian had looked at him, the way she'd said his name. Around 2 a.m, he gave up and went downstairs to make coffee, and that's when he saw the light on across the street. Vivian's kitchen light. He stood at the window staring at it, and before he could talk himself out of it, he pulled on his shoes and walked across the street. He knocked softly, not wanting to wake the neighbors, and a moment later the door opened. Vivian stood there in pajamas, her eyes red like she'd been crying. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I saw your light on." "So you decided to just show up at 2 a.m? "I wanted to make sure you were okay." Vivian laughed, a bitter sound. "I'm fine." "You're a terrible liar. I'm also tired and not in the mood for this." She started to close the door, but Ethan put his hand on it. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't push me away." "I'm not pushing you away. I'm protecting both of us." "From what?" "From this ending badly." "Because that's what's going to happen, Ethan. You're going to realize I'm too broken to fix, and you're going to leave, and Maya's going to get hurt in the process. So let's just stop now before it gets worse." Ethan stepped closer, and Vivian's breath hitched. "I don't think you're broken." "Then you're not paying attention." "I'm paying plenty of attention, and what I see is someone who's been hurt and scared and alone for way too long, but that doesn't make you broken. It just makes you human." Vivian's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because if I let you in, if I let myself care about you and then you leave," her voice broke, "I won't survive it." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest, and Ethan realized just how deep her fear went. This wasn't about him. It was about everyone who'd ever left her, her mother, her father, everyone she'd ever tried to love. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. "You don't know that." "You're right. I don't. But I'm not going to walk away just because you're scared. So you can push me as hard as you want, Vivian. I'm not leaving." She stared at him, tears streaming down her face. And then she did something he didn't expect. She kissed him. It was desperate and messy and tasted like salt, and Ethan's brain short-circuited for a second before he kissed her back. His hands came up to her face, his thumbs brushing away her tears, and for a moment the rest of the world disappeared. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I shouldn't have done that," Vivian whispered. Probably not. This is a mistake. Probably. So why aren't you leaving? Because I don't want to. Vivian closed her eyes and leaned her forehead against his chest. I don't know how to do this. We'll figure it out. What about Maya? What about her? What if she gets attached to me and then this doesn't work out? What if it does work out? Vivian pulled back to look at him. You're an optimist. Someone has to be. She laughed, and this time it wasn't bitter. It was soft and almost hopeful, and Ethan felt something in his chest crack wide open. Stay, Vivian said quietly. What? Don't go. Not yet. Just stay with me for a little while. Ethan should have said no. He should have gone home, should have put some distance between them, should have thought about all the ways this could go wrong. But he didn't. He followed her inside, and they sat on the couch in the dark, not talking, just existing in the same space. And for the first time in years, Vivian didn't feel alone. Ethan left before sunrise, slipping out quietly so the neighbors wouldn't see. When he got home, Maya was still asleep, and he stood in her doorway for a long time, watching her breathe, wondering if he was making a terrible mistake. But when he thought about the way Vivian had looked at him, the way she'd kissed him like she was drowning and he was air, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. Over the next few days, they didn't talk about what had happened. They fell back into their routine, working in the garden, making small talk, pretending everything was normal. But there were moments when their hands would brush or their eyes would meet, and Ethan could see the same question written all over Vivian's face. What are we doing? He didn't have an answer. The day before Vivian's mother was supposed to arrive, the weather turned. Dark clouds rolled in from the west, heavy and low, and by mid-afternoon, the wind had picked up enough to rattle the windows. Storm's coming, Ethan said, looking up at the sky. Vivian followed his gaze. How bad? Hard to say. Could be nothing. Could be bad. Should we cover the garden? Probably a good idea. They spent the next hour securing everything they could, tying down the climbing vines, covering the new flower beds with tarps, moving the potted plants closer to the house. Maya helped for a while before getting bored and going inside to draw. By the time they finished, the first drops of rain were starting to fall. You should get Maya home, Vivian said, pulling her jacket tighter. Yeah, you going to be okay? I'll be fine. But she didn't look fine. She looked tense, her shoulders tight, her eyes darting toward the darkening sky. Vivian, I'm fine, Ethan. Really. Go. He wanted to argue, but the rain was picking up and he needed to get Maya home before it got worse. So he nodded and jogged across the street, calling for Maya as he went. By the time they got inside, the rain was coming down in sheets. Maya pressed her face to the window, watching the water pour off the roof. It's really raining. Yeah, it is. Is Miss Vivian scared? Why would she be scared? Because her house is really big and she's all alone. Ethan looked out the window toward Vivian's house, and something in his chest tightened. Maya was right. Vivian was alone. Go get your pajamas on, he told Maya, and brush your teeth. But it's only 6 o'clock. I know, but I want you ready for bed just in case the power goes out. Maya grumbled but did as she was told, and Ethan pulled out his phone and texted Vivian. You doing okay over there? A few minutes passed before she replied. Fine. Just a lot of rain. He stared at the message, trying to decide if she was telling the truth, when another text came through. The basement is leaking. Shit, Ethan muttered. He called Sue, his neighbor, and asked if she could come over and stay with Maya for a little while. She agreed without asking questions, and 10 minutes later, Ethan was pulling on his rain jacket and heading back across the street. The rain was brutal, cold, and sharp, and by the time he reached Vivian's front door, he was soaked through. He pounded on the door, and Vivian opened it almost immediately. What are you doing here? She asked. You said the basement was leaking. I didn't ask you to come over. I know. I came anyway. She stared at him for a moment, then stepped aside to let him in. Water dripped off his jacket onto her pristine floor, but she didn't seem to care. It's bad, she said. I went down there an hour ago, and there was already standing water. Show me. She led him to the basement door, and he descended the stairs, the sound of dripping water growing louder with every step. When he reached the bottom, he swore under his breath. The entire basement was flooded. Not just a little water, several inches of it, dark and cold, spreading across the concrete floor, It was coming in through a crack in the foundation, the same crack he'd noticed weeks ago but hadn't thought was urgent. Jesus, Ethan said. Can you fix it? Not tonight. Not in this storm. The best I can do is try to redirect the water so it doesn't get worse. He waded into the water, ignoring the cold seeping through his boots, and started moving boxes and storage bins to higher ground. Vivian came down to help, and together they worked in silence, the sound of rain hammering the house above them. It took over an hour, and by the time they finished, both of them were soaked and exhausted. Ethan's hands were numb, and his back ached, but at least the water wasn't rising as fast. That's the best I can do for now, he said, climbing back up the stairs. Vivian followed him, her arms wrapped around herself. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You're going to need a foundation specialist to fix that crack properly, and it's not going to be cheap. I don't care about the money. I know, but I'm telling you anyway. They stood in the hallway, dripping water onto the floor, and then the lights flickered. Once, twice, and then the power went out. The house plunged into darkness, and Vivian's breath hitched. It's okay, Ethan said quickly. Do you have candles? A flashlight? I don't know, maybe in the kitchen? He pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight, then led her into the kitchen. She opened a few drawers, her hands shaking, before finding a box of emergency candles and a lighter. Ethan lit 3 of them and set them on the counter, and the soft glow pushed back some of the darkness. Better? He asked. Vivian nodded, but she didn't look better. She looked pale and shaken, and her hands were still trembling. Vivian, what's wrong? Nothing. I'm fine. You keep saying that, but you're clearly not. I just don't like storms. There's more to it than that. She turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. Can you just drop it? No. Ethan, talk to me. I said drop it. Her voice cracked, and Ethan realized she wasn't just scared. She was on the edge of a full-blown panic. He crossed the room and gently turned her to face him. Vivian, look at me. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Look at me. She did, and what he saw in her eyes broke his heart. Pure, unfiltered terror. What happened? He asked softly. My father, she whispered. He died during a storm just like this. Ethan's stomach dropped. Vivian. He was driving home from a business trip. The roads were flooded and he lost control and she couldn't finish. She just shook her head, sobbing. Ethan pulled her into his arms and held her while she fell apart. She clung to him like he was the only thing keeping her upright, and maybe he was. I couldn't save him, she choked out. I didn't even know he was gone until the police called. And now, every time it storms like this, I can't breathe. I can't think. I just keep seeing it in my head over and over. I'm so sorry. I thought I was over it. I thought I'd moved past it, but I haven't. I'm still stuck in that night 2 years ago, and I don't know how to get out. Ethan tightened his hold on her. You don't have to get out tonight. You just have to get through tonight, and I'm going to help you. You should go home. Maya needs you. Sue's with Maya. I'm staying. Ethan, I'm staying. Vivian looked up at him, her face streaked with tears, and something shifted in her expression. The fear was still there, but so was something else, something that looked a lot like trust. Okay, she whispered. He led her to the couch and sat down beside her, pulling a blanket over both of them. Outside, the storm raged on, the wind howling and the rain pounding against the windows. But inside, in the candlelight, they sat together in the quiet. Tell me something, Vivian said after a while. Something good. Like what? I don't know, anything. I just need to hear your voice. So Ethan talked. He told her about the first time Maya had ridden a bike without training wheels, how she'd been so excited she'd crashed into a mailbox and laughed the whole time. He told her about the job he'd done last year building a treehouse for a kid with cancer, and how the kid's mom had cried when she saw it. He told her about his own father, who taught him everything he knew about carpentry before dying of lung cancer when Ethan was 19. I'm sorry, Vivian said. I didn't know. It's okay. It was a long time ago. Does it ever get easier? Losing someone you love? Ethan thought about it. It gets different. The sharp edges smooth out, but it never really goes away. You just learn to carry it. I don't know if I can carry this. You already are. Vivian was quiet for a long time, and then she said, "I'm glad you're here." "Me too." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and Ethan wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. And somewhere between the thunder and the flickering candlelight, something inside Vivian finally started to let go. The storm didn't let up until morning. When Ethan finally woke, he didn't even remember falling asleep. Pale gray light was filtering through the windows, and the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Vivian was still asleep beside him, her head on his chest, her breathing slow and steady. He didn't move. He just lay there, watching her. And for the first time since this whole thing started, he let himself admit the truth. He was falling in love with her. It was terrifying and complicated and probably a terrible idea, but it was true. And there was no going back now. Vivian stirred, her eyes fluttering open, and when she saw him looking at her, she froze. "Hi," Ethan said softly. "Hi. How are you feeling?" She sat up slowly, running a hand through her tangled hair. "Embarrassed." "Don't be. I completely fell apart last night. You had a panic attack. That's nothing to be embarrassed about. I should have told you about my father, about the storm. You're telling me now. That's what matters." Vivian looked at him, and her eyes were so full of emotion it made Ethan's chest ache. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been here," she said quietly. "You would have been fine. You're stronger than you think." "I don't feel strong. That's because you've been carrying this alone for too long, but you don't have to anymore." Vivian's eyes filled with tears, but this time she didn't look away. "Ethan, I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of this. Of you. Of how much I already care about you." Ethan reached out and took her hand. "I'm scared too." "Then why are we doing this?" "Because some things are worth being scared for." Vivian stared at him, and then she leaned forward and kissed him. It was softer this time, slower, like she was trying to memorize the feel of it. When she pulled back, her cheeks were flushed. "My mother's coming today," she said. "I know." "I don't want to see her." "Then don't." "It's not that simple." "It is, actually. You call her, you tell her not to come, and you hang up. That's it. She won't accept that. Then she can be mad. But you don't owe her anything, Vivian. Not after everything she's put you through." Vivian looked down at their joined hands. "What if you're wrong? What if I do owe her?" "You don't. But she's my mother. And you're a grown woman who gets to decide who she lets into her life. If she makes you miserable, you don't have to put up with it. Not for her. Not for anyone." Vivian was quiet for a long time. Then she picked up her phone, scrolled to her mother's number, and stared at it. "Do it," Ethan said gently. She took a deep breath, hit the call button, and waited. Her mother answered on the second ring. "Vivian, I'm at the airport. My flight board's in 20 minutes. Don't get on the plane." Silence. "Excuse me?" "I said don't get on the plane. I don't want you to come." "Vivian, we've been over this. We need to discuss—" "No, we don't. You want to lecture me about the company and tell me I'm not living up to Dad's legacy, but I'm done listening to that. You're being childish." "Maybe. But I'm also being honest. You don't care about me, Mother. You care about the company, and I'm tired of pretending that's the same thing. Your father would be ashamed." "Don't." Vivian's voice was hard now, steady. "Don't you dare use him against me. He loved me, and he would want me to be happy. Not successful, not perfect. Happy." "And are you happy?" Vivian looked at Ethan, and a small smile crossed her face. "I'm getting there." Her mother was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Fine, I won't come. But this conversation isn't over." "Yes," Vivian said quietly. "It is." And she hung up. For a moment she just sat there, staring at the phone like she couldn't believe what she'd done. Then she started laughing, big breathless laughs that shook her whole body. "I did it," she said. "I actually did it. You did." She's going to be furious, probably. "I don't care." Ethan grinned. "Good." Vivian threw her arms around him and kissed him again. And this time there was no hesitation, no fear, just relief and joy and something that felt a lot like freedom. When they finally pulled apart, Vivian rested her forehead against his. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For helping me remember who I am." Ethan brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. You did that all on your own. No, I didn't. I couldn't have done this without you. Well, you're stuck with me now. Good, because I'm not letting you go. And in that moment, sitting in the wreckage of the storm with candles burned down to nothing and the smell of rain still in the air, Vivian realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. The freedom didn't last. 3 days after Vivian hung up on her mother, reality started creeping back in. Ethan noticed it first, the way Vivian would pull out her phone and stare at it, the way she'd go quiet in the middle of conversations, the way she'd started pacing the house at night when she thought no one was watching. He didn't push. He just kept showing up, kept working on the garden, kept bringing Maya over because the kid had decided Vivian was now her favorite person, and nothing was going to change that. But on the 4th day, Vivian finally broke. They were in the kitchen, Ethan making sandwiches while Vivian sat at the table pretending to work on her laptop. Maya was outside, chasing butterflies that had shown up now that the garden was blooming. I need to tell you something, Vivian said suddenly. Ethan set down the knife. Okay. My mother called the board. When? Yesterday. She told them I was having a breakdown, that I was making irrational decisions and needed to be removed from my position. Ethan's jaw tightened. Can she do that? She's on the board. She has influence, and honestly, she's not completely wrong. About what? I haven't been to the office in over a year. I barely attend virtual meetings. I've been running the company on autopilot while I hide in this house. Vivian closed her laptop and rubbed her face. Maybe she's right. Maybe I'm not fit to be CEO anymore. That's bullshit. Is it? Yes. You're going through something. That doesn't make you incompetent. Tell that to the board. Ethan walked over and sat down across from her. What do you want to do? I don't know. Part of me wants to fight her, prove I can still run the company, but another part of me wants to just walk away from all of it. Then walk away. Vivian looked at him like he'd suggested she jump off a bridge. I can't just walk away. Why not? Because it's my father's company. It's his legacy. It's also making you miserable. That's not the point. That's exactly the point. Ethan leaned forward. Vivian, I've watched you over the past few weeks. You're a different person when you're in that garden than when you're on the phone dealing with work stuff. You light up. You laugh. You actually look like you're enjoying your life. Why would you give that up just to make your mother happy? Because I don't know who I am without the company. It's been my whole identity for 10 years. Then maybe it's time to figure out who you are without it. Vivian stared at him, and he could see the war happening behind her eyes. Fear and hope battling it out, neither one winning. I'm scared, she said quietly. I know. What if I walk away and regret it? What if you don't? She didn't have an answer for that. That night, Vivian couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning in circles. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father's face, heard his voice telling her how proud he was of what they'd built together. How could she just abandon that? How could she let it go? But then she thought about the past 2 years. The isolation. The panic attacks. The way she'd been slowly disappearing into this house, into her grief, until there was almost nothing left of her. And she thought about Ethan, about the way he looked at her like she was worth saving, about Maya's laughter echoing through the garden, about the way she'd felt when she stood up to her mother, terrified, yes, but also alive in a way she hadn't been in years. Around 3 a.m, she gave up on sleep and went downstairs. She made coffee, opened her laptop, and started writing. It took her 2 hours to finish, and when she was done, her hands were shaking. But she didn't let herself overthink it. She just hit send and closed the laptop before she could change her mind. The next morning, Ethan showed up to find Vivian sitting on the back porch, looking calmer than she had in days. You okay? He asked. I quit. Ethan stopped mid-step. You what? I sent my resignation to the board this morning, effective immediately. Vivian, I know, it's insane, but I couldn't do it anymore. I've been holding on to that company like it was the only thing keeping my father alive. But it's not. He's gone. And no amount of quarterly reports or board meetings is going to bring him back. She looked up at Ethan, and there were tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. I chose me. For the first time in my life, I chose what I wanted instead of what everyone else expected. Ethan sat down beside her and took her hand. How do you feel? Terrified, relieved, free, all of it at once. Your mother's going to lose her mind. She already called 3 times. I haven't answered. Good. Vivian laughed, and it sounded lighter than anything he'd heard from her before. I don't know what I'm going to do now. I've never not worked. I don't even have hobbies. You have a garden. That's not a hobby. That's something we did together. So we'll keep doing it, and you'll figure out the rest as you go. Vivian squeezed his hand. What if I'm making a huge mistake? Then you'll fix it. But I don't think you are. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat there in the quiet morning light, the garden blooming around them. For the first time in years, Vivian felt like she could breathe. The first few days after quitting were strange. Vivian didn't know what to do with herself. She'd wake up at her usual time, make coffee, and then just sit there. No emails to answer, no meetings to attend, nothing but empty hours stretching out in front of her. It should have felt good, but mostly it just felt disorienting. You're allowed to relax, you know, Ethan said one afternoon. They were replanting some of the flowers that hadn't survived the storm, and Vivian had been attacking the dirt like it had personally wronged her. I am relaxing. You're stabbing the ground with a trowel. Vivian stopped and looked down at her hands. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Nothing. I've never just done nothing. Then don't do nothing. Do something you actually enjoy. Like what? I don't know. What did you like doing before the company took over your life? Vivian thought about it. It had been so long, she wasn't even sure she remembered. I used to read a lot, and I liked hiking, and there was this pottery class I took in college that I really enjoyed. So do those things. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. Vivian sat back on her heels and looked at him. Why do you make everything sound so easy? Because most things are easier than we make them. We just convince ourselves they're complicated because it's safer than actually trying. When did you get so wise? I have a 6-year-old. She asks about 1,000 questions a day. You learn to simplify. Vivian smiled despite herself. She's a good kid. She likes you. I like her too. They worked in silence for a while, and then Vivian said, Ethan, can I ask you something? Sure. Where's this going? With us, I mean. Ethan's hand stilled in the dirt. Where do you want it to go? I don't know. That's why I'm asking. He set down his tools and turned to face her. I like you, Vivian. A lot. And I think you like me too. But I also know you're still figuring things out, and I don't want to push you into something you're not ready for. What if I'm never ready? Then we'll deal with that when we get there. But I'm not going to walk away just because things are complicated. Even with Maya in this picture? Especially with Maya in the picture, because she already cares about you, and I'm not going to let you disappear on her. Vivian's throat tightened. I would never do that. I know, but I need you to know that if we do this, if we actually try to make this work, it's not just about you and me. It's about her too, and that means you can't run when things get hard. I'm not going to run. You sure about that? Vivian met his eyes. I'm sure. Ethan searched her face for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. Okay. Yeah, let's do this. Just like that? Just like that, Vivian laughed, the sound somewhere between disbelief and joy. You're insane. Probably, but so are you, so we're a good match. She kissed him then, right there in the dirt with mud on their hands and the sun beating down on their backs. And for the first time since this whole thing started, Vivian let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this could actually work. That belief lasted exactly 3 days. Vivian was at the grocery store, her first time out in public in over a month, when she ran into someone she knew. Christina Hart, a former colleague from her early days at the company. They'd been friendly once back before Vivian became CEO and everything got complicated. Vivian, oh my God, is that really you? Vivian turned and saw Christina walking toward her, a huge smile on her face. Hi, Christina. I can't believe it's you. I heard you quit. Is it true? It's true. Wow. That's huge. What are you going to do now? I'm not sure yet. I'm just taking some time to figure things out. Christina's smile faltered. Are you okay? I heard your mom was telling people you had a breakdown. Vivian's stomach dropped. She said what? God, You didn't know. I'm so sorry. I thought, what exactly did she say? Christina shifted uncomfortably. Just that you'd been struggling since your dad died and that she was worried about you. She made it sound like you needed help. She told people I was unstable. She didn't use that word, but yeah, kind of. Vivian felt her face go hot. Thanks for telling me. Of course, and hey, if you ever want to grab coffee and talk, I'm around. I know things are probably really hard right now. I'm fine, Vivian said, her voice tight. Are you sure? Because I said I'm fine. Christina took a step back, her smile gone. Okay. Well, take care of yourself. She walked away, and Vivian stood there in the middle of the cereal aisle, shaking with rage. By the time she got home, she'd worked herself into a full panic. She called Ethan before she even got out of the car. I need to see you, she said the second he answered. What's wrong? Can you just come over, please? I'm on my way. He showed up 10 minutes later, Maya in tow, because Sue was at a doctor's appointment. Vivian opened the door, and Maya immediately ran inside, but Ethan stayed on the porch. Talk to me, he said. My mother is telling people I had a breakdown, that I'm unstable. She's destroying my reputation because I wouldn't do what she wanted. Vivian, I should never have quit. I should have stayed and fought her. Now she's going to turn everyone against me and I'll have nothing left. That's not true. Yes, it is. Don't you get it? The company was all I had, and now I don't even have that. Ethan stepped closer. You have a lot more than that. Like what? Like me. Like Maya. Like the life you're building. That's not enough. The words came out before she could stop them, and she saw the hurt flash across Ethan's face. What? He said quietly. I didn't mean it like that. Then how did you mean it? I need more than this. I need purpose. I need to feel like I'm doing something that matters. And being with us doesn't matter? That's not what I said. It's what it sounded like. Vivian's chest tightened. Ethan, I'm sorry. I'm freaking out right now, and I'm not thinking straight. So what are you going to do? Go back to the company? Let your mother win? I don't know. Maybe. Are you serious? I don't know what else to do. You could trust that things are going to be okay. You could believe that you made the right choice. You could stop running back to the thing that made you miserable just because it's familiar. It's not that simple. It is that simple. You're just too scared to see it. Don't tell me what I'm feeling. Then stop lying to yourself. They stared at each other, both breathing hard, and then Maya appeared in the doorway. Why are you fighting? She asked, her voice small. Ethan's expression softened immediately. We're not fighting, sweetheart. We're just talking. It sounds like fighting. I know. I'm sorry. He looked at Vivian. We should go. Ethan, we'll talk later. He took Maya's hand and walked down the porch steps, and Vivian stood there watching them leave, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to call him back, wanted to tell him he was right, that she was scared, that she didn't know how to let go of the past. But the words stuck in her throat, and by the time she found her voice, they were already gone. That night, Vivian didn't sleep at all. She paced the house, replaying the conversation over and over, hating herself for what she'd said. Ethan had been right. She was running. She was so terrified of failing at this new life that she was ready to crawl back to the old one, even though it had nearly destroyed her. Around dawn, she made a decision. She got dressed, pulled her hair back, and drove to her mother's house for the first time in 2 years. Her mother answered the door in a silk robe, her face carefully composed. Vivian, this is a surprise. We need to talk. Come in. Vivian followed her mother into the pristine living room, the same room where she'd spent countless holidays feeling like she was never quite good enough. I know what you've been telling people, Vivian said, about me having a breakdown. Her mother didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. I've been expressing concern for your well-being. That's what mothers do. You've been sabotaging me. I've been trying to protect you from yourself. By destroying my reputation. By making sure people understand that your recent decisions weren't made in a sound state of mind. Vivian laughed, a bitter sound. You're unbelievable. I'm practical. You quit a multi-million-dollar company to play in a garden with some contractor. What was I supposed to think? That I was finally choosing happiness over obligation. Happiness doesn't pay the bills, Vivian. I don't need the money. Dad left me more than enough. This isn't about money. It's about legacy, about honoring your father's memory. Don't! Vivian's voice was sharp. Don't you dare use him against me. He would have wanted me to be happy. He told me that all the time, but you never cared about that. You only cared about appearances, about what people would think. Her mother's jaw tightened. I cared about making sure you didn't throw away everything you'd worked for. I didn't throw it away. I let it go. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, you've isolated yourself, attached yourself to the first man who showed you attention, and convinced yourself that's love. You don't know anything about what I feel. I know you're making a mistake, and when it falls apart, and it will, you're going to realize how much you've lost. Vivian stared at her mother, and for the first time in her life, she saw her clearly, not as some all-powerful figure she needed to impress, just as a scared, lonely woman who couldn't stand to see her daughter choose a different path. You're wrong, Vivian said quietly, about all of it. Ethan isn't some rebound. He's the first person in years who's seen me as more than a title or a bank account. And yes, I quit the company, but I didn't throw away my life. I saved it. You're deluding yourself. Maybe, but I'd rather be deluded and happy than miserable and successful. Her mother's face went cold. If you walk out that door, don't expect me to be here when you come crawling back. I won't be coming back. Vivian, I'm done, Mother. I'm done trying to be who you want me to be. I'm done letting you make me feel like I'm not enough. And I'm done giving you power over my life. She turned and walked toward the door, and her mother called after her. You're going to regret this. Vivian stopped and looked back. The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. And then she left. She drove straight to Ethan's house, her hand shaking on the steering wheel. When she pulled up, he was in the front yard fixing the mailbox Maya had accidentally knocked over with her bike. He looked up as she got out of the car, his expression guarded. Vivian, I'm sorry, she said, the words tumbling out. I'm sorry for what I said. You and Maya do matter. You matter more than anything. I was just scared and I said something stupid, and I need you to know that I didn't mean it. Ethan set down his hammer and walked over to her. Where have you been? My mother's house. I told her to stay out of my life. And? And she told me I'd regret choosing you over the company. What did you say? I told her the only thing I regret is not doing it sooner. Vivian took a shaky breath. I meant what I said the other day. I'm not running. I'm staying. And I know I'm going to screw up sometimes, and I know I'm still figuring things out, but I'm asking you to be patient with me. Because I want this. I want you. I want all of it. Ethan's expression softened. You sure? I'm sure. He pulled her into his arms and held her tight, and Vivian felt something inside her finally settle. We're going to be okay, Ethan said quietly. I know. Even when things get hard. Even then. He pulled back to look at her. Maya's inside. You want to come in and tell her yourself? Vivian nodded, and together they walked into the house. Maya was at the kitchen table, coloring, and when she saw Vivian, she jumped up and ran over. You're back! I'm back. Are you and Daddy still fighting? No, sweetheart. We're not fighting anymore. Maya looked between them, then threw her arms around Vivian's waist. Good, because I like it when you're here. Vivian's throat tightened. I like being here too. And in that moment, standing in Ethan's tiny kitchen with Maya's arms wrapped around her, and Ethan smiling at her like she was the best thing that had ever happened to him, Vivian realized something. She'd finally found what she'd been looking for all along. Not success, not approval, just love. Simple, messy, imperfect love. And it was more than enough. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Vivian had expected some kind of magical transformation, like standing up to her mother and choosing Ethan would suddenly make everything fall into place. But real life didn't work that way. Real life was messy and uncertain, and some days she woke up wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. The hardest part was the quiet. She'd spent 10 years with her calendar packed, every hour accounted for, her phone buzzing constantly with emails and calls and urgent requests. Now her days stretched out in front of her with no structure, no purpose, and the silence was deafening. She tried to fill it. She started reading again, burned through half a dozen novels in the first 2 weeks. She signed up for a pottery class at the community center, showed up to the first session, and spent 2 hours making a lopsided bowl while surrounded by retirees who kept asking if she was okay. She went hiking on the trails outside the city, but being alone with her thoughts for that long just made her anxious. Nothing felt right. Nothing felt like enough. "You're spiraling," Ethan said one afternoon. They were in the garden, always the garden, and Vivian had been pulling weeds with a kind of manic intensity that suggested she was trying to uproot something deeper than dandelions. "I'm not spiraling. You've been attacking that same patch of dirt for 20 minutes. Vivian sat back on her heels and looked at the holes she'd dug. He was right. She'd completely destroyed a section of perfectly good soil. "I don't know what I'm doing," she said quietly. "With the garden? With my life." Ethan set down his tools and came over to sit beside her. "You're figuring it out. That's what you're doing. It doesn't feel like figuring it out. It feels like falling apart. Sometimes those things look the same." Vivian pulled off her gardening gloves and stared at her hands. They were dirty, calloused from weeks of working outside. She'd never had calluses before. "What if I never find it?" "Find what?" "Whatever I'm supposed to do next. What if I just wander around for the rest of my life feeling lost?" "Then you wander, and eventually you'll wander into something that fits." "That's not very reassuring." "I'm not trying to reassure you. I'm trying to tell you the truth." Ethan reached over and took her hand. "You spent your whole life doing what other people expected. Your dad, your mom, the board. You never gave yourself permission to just exist without a plan. So yeah, it feels weird. It's supposed to." "How long is it supposed to feel weird?" "I don't know. As long as it takes." Vivian leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm not very good at this." "At what?" "Not having control. Not knowing what comes next. Nobody's good at it. We just pretend we are." They sat there in the sun, and Vivian tried to let his words sink in. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that this uncomfortable, untethered feeling was normal and temporary. But part of her still worried that she'd made a mistake, that she'd given up something real and important for something that might not last. That night, Maya asked Vivian to read her a bedtime story. It had become a routine over the past few weeks. Ethan would make dinner, Vivian would clean up, and then they'd both go upstairs to tuck Maya in. It felt domestic and comfortable and terrifying all at once, because Vivian kept waiting for the moment when Maya would realize she wasn't actually her mother and didn't belong there. But that moment never came. "This one," Maya said, pulling a book off the shelf. It was worn and dog-eared, clearly a favorite. Vivian settled into the chair beside the bed and opened the book. It was about a girl who planted a garden and watched it grow, which felt almost too on the nose, but she read it anyway. Maya snuggled under the covers, her eyes getting heavy halfway through. When Vivian finished, she closed the book and started to stand, but Maya's small hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. "Wait," Maya said. "What's wrong?" "Are you going to stay?" "I'm just going downstairs, sweetheart. Your dad's waiting." "No, I mean stay. Like forever." Vivian's breath caught. Because I want you to stay. I like having you here. I like being here too." "So you'll stay?" Vivian looked down at Maya's face, so open and trusting, and felt something crack wide open in her chest. "Yeah," she said softly. "I'll stay." Maya smiled and closed her eyes, and within minutes she was asleep. Vivian sat there for a long time, just watching her breathe, and realized that somewhere along the way this little girl had become hers. Not legally, not officially, but in all the ways that actually mattered. When she finally went downstairs, Ethan was on the couch with a beer, flipping through channels without really watching anything. "She asleep?" he asked. "Yeah." Vivian sat down beside him. "She asked me if I was going to stay." Ethan muted the TV. "What did you say?" "I said yes." "And did you mean it?" "I think so. I want to mean it." "That's not the same thing." Vivian turned to face him. "I know, but it's the best I can do right now. I'm still scared, Ethan. I'm scared that I'm going to screw this up, that I'm going to hurt her, that I'm going to hurt you." "You probably will," Ethan said. "Not on purpose. But we're all going to screw up sometimes. That's part of this." "How are you so calm about that?" "Because I've already been through the worst-case scenario. Maya's mom left, and we survived. So whatever happens with us, I know we'll get through it." "That's a pretty low bar," Ethan smiled. "Yeah, well, I'm a practical guy." Vivian leaned into him and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They sat like that for a while, not talking, just being together. And slowly the knot of anxiety in Vivian's chest started to loosen. Maybe she didn't need to have everything figured out. Maybe it was okay to just take it one day at a time and see where it led. A month later, Vivian got a call from her former assistant at the company. She almost didn't answer. She'd been avoiding anything related to her old life. But curiosity got the better of her. Vivian, hi. I'm sorry to bother you, but I thought you should know. The board just announced they're selling the company. Vivian's stomach dropped. What? Your mother pushed for it, said it was time to cash out while the market was strong. The deal's already in motion. Who are they selling to? Some private equity firm. They're planning to gut half the staff and restructure everything. Vivian closed her eyes. When? The announcement goes public next week. Thanks for telling me. She hung up and sat there, staring at the wall. Her father's company. The thing he'd built from nothing, being sold off and torn apart like it didn't matter. She should feel something, she thought. Anger, sadness, regret. But all she felt was a strange kind of emptiness. Ethan found her sitting in the kitchen an hour later, still holding her phone. What's wrong? He asked. They're selling the company. My mother convinced the board to sell. I'm sorry. Are you? I thought you'd be happy. Now I can't go back even if I wanted to. Is that what you want? No, I don't know. Maybe. Vivian set the phone down. I spent 10 years building that company with my father, and now it's just gone. Like it never mattered. It mattered. But it's not yours anymore. You let it go, remember? I know, but I don't know what I thought. That they'd struggle without me. That they'd realize they needed me. That it would all fall apart and prove I was important. And instead they moved on. Yeah. Ethan pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. You want to know what I think? Not really, but I have a feeling you're going to tell me anyway. I think you're upset because this is proof that you're not indispensable. And that scares you, because if the company can survive without you, then what does that say about your worth? Vivian's jaw tightened. That's not... Yes, it is. You've spent your whole life tying your value to what you can produce, what you can achieve, how important you are. But now you're in a place where none of that matters, and you don't know how to exist without it. So what am I supposed to do? Stop trying to prove your worth and just accept that you have it. Not because of what you do, just because of who you are. Vivian stared at him. That's easier said than done. I know. But you're not alone in figuring it out. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that he didn't understand. But deep down, she knew he was right. She'd been so focused on doing, on achieving, on being useful, that she'd forgotten how to just be. I don't know how to do that, she said quietly. Then we'll figure it out together. Over the next few weeks, Vivian slowly started to let go. Not all at once. She wasn't capable of that. But in small ways. She stopped checking the business news every morning. She turned off notifications on her phone. She let herself sleep in on days when she didn't have anywhere to be. And she started to notice things she'd missed before. The way the morning light hit the garden. The sound of Maya's laughter echoing through the house. The feeling of Ethan's hand in hers as they walked through the neighborhood. She started cooking, something she hadn't done in years. The first few attempts were disasters. Burned pasta, oversalted chicken, a cake that came out of the oven, looking like a deflated tire. But Ethan and Maya ate it anyway, and eventually she got better. She joined a book club at the local library and was surprised to find she actually enjoyed it. The discussions were heated and opinionated, and nobody cared that she used to be a CEO. They just cared whether she'd done the reading. She started volunteering at Maya's school, helping in the library once a week. The librarian, a cheerful woman named Denise, put her to work shelving books and reading to the first graders. It was simple, unglamorous work, and Vivian loved it. One afternoon, Denise asked her if she'd be interested in helping organize a book drive for underserved schools in the area. I don't know if I'm the right person for that, Vivian said. Why not? You're organized, you're smart, and you clearly care about kids. That's all we need. I've never done anything like that before. So, you'll learn. Vivian thought about it, and for the first time in months, she felt a spark of something that looked like excitement. Okay, she said. I'll do it. The book drive consumed her in a way she hadn't expected. She threw herself into it with the same intensity she'd once brought to board meetings and product launches. She set up donation sites, reached out to local businesses for sponsorships, organized volunteers. Within 2 months, they'd collected over 5,000 books. The day they delivered the books to the first school, Vivian stood in the back of the library and watched as kids ran their fingers over the spines, their faces lighting up as they found titles they wanted to read. And something inside her shifted. This was important, not because it made her money or boosted her reputation, but because it mattered to these kids. It made their lives better, even if only in a small way. "You look happy," Ethan said later that night. They were sitting on Vivian's back porch, watching the sun set over the garden. "I am happy," Vivian said, surprised to realize it was true. "What changed?" "I stopped trying to be who I used to be, and I started figuring out who I actually am." "And who's that?" Vivian thought about it. "Someone who cares more about people than profits. Someone who'd rather spend her Saturday reading to first graders than sitting in a boardroom. Someone who's okay with not having all the answers." "I like that person." "Yeah?" "Yeah." Vivian leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For being patient while I figured this out. You're worth being patient for." They sat in comfortable silence, and Vivian realized that for the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about what came next. She was just here, in this moment, and that was enough. 3 months later, on a Saturday morning in late summer, Maya turned 7. Vivian and Ethan had spent the past week planning a party in the backyard. Nothing fancy, just a few of Maya's friends from school, some games, and a homemade cake that Vivian had practiced making 3 times to get right. The morning of the party, Vivian woke up early and went downstairs to find Ethan already in the kitchen, frosting the cake. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep. Too excited." "You're more excited than Maya." "She's my kid. I'm allowed to be excited." Vivian walked over and wrapped her arms around him from behind. "You're a good dad." "I try." "You do more than try." He turned around and kissed her, slow and sweet, and Vivian felt that familiar warmth spread through her chest. She still wasn't used to it. This feeling of being wanted, of being chosen, of being loved, but she was learning to accept it. "I love you," she said. Ethan's eyes widened. It was the first time she'd said it out loud. "Say that again," he said. "I love you." "You sure?" "I'm sure." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Vivian thought about how far she'd come. From the woman who couldn't leave her house to the woman who was planning birthday parties and saying, "I love you," and building a life she actually wanted to live. The party was chaos in the best way. Kids running through the garden, shrieking with laughter as they played tag and hunted for the treasure Ethan had hidden. Parents standing around with coffee, chatting and watching their kids play. Vivian found herself in the middle of it all, helping settle disputes over the piñata and handing out juice boxes and feeling more at home than she had in years. At one point, she looked up and saw Ethan watching her from across the yard. He smiled, and she smiled back, and she knew he was thinking the same thing she was. This was it. This was what mattered. Later, after the guests had left and Maya was inside opening presents with one of her friends who'd stayed late, Vivian and Ethan sat on the porch steps, surveying the wreckage of the party. "We should probably clean this up," Vivian said, looking at the scattered cups and paper plates. "In a minute." They sat in the fading light, and Ethan reached over and took her hand. "I love you too," he said, in case that wasn't clear. It was clear, but it's nice to hear. "I want you to move in with us." Vivian's heart stuttered. "What?" "You're here every day anyway. Maya loves you. I love you. It makes sense." "Ethan, that's a big step, I know, but I think we're ready. And if you're not, that's okay. But I wanted you to know that's what I want." Vivian looked at him. This man who had walked into her life when she was at her lowest and somehow seen past all the walls she'd built. Who had been patient when she was scared, honest when she was lying to herself, and steady when she felt like she was falling apart. "I want that too," she said. "Yeah?" "Yeah, but I'm keeping my house." Ethan laughed. "We can't afford 2 mortgages." "I can, and I'm not selling it, not yet. I need to know I have somewhere to go if I need space." "That's fair." And I need to do this slowly. I can't just pack up and move in overnight. We'll go as slow as you need. Vivian squeezed his hand. Okay, then yes, I'll move in with you. Ethan pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and Vivian felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the desperate, grasping kind of hope that came from trying to control everything, but the quiet, steady kind that came from trusting that things would work out, even if she couldn't see how. 6 months later, Vivian was standing in the kitchen of what used to be her house, now mostly empty except for a few pieces of furniture she couldn't bring herself to sell. She'd officially moved in with Ethan and Maya 2 months ago, but she'd kept the house just like she said she would. She came here sometimes when she needed to think, to remember who she used to be and how far she'd come. She walked through the empty rooms, her footsteps echoing, and ended up in the kitchen. She looked at the refrigerator, now bare except for one thing, Maya's drawing, the one she'd made that first week, the house with the 3 stick figures. Vivian carefully took it down and folded it, slipping it into her pocket. Then she locked up the house and drove back to Ethan's. When she walked in, Maya was at the kitchen table doing homework and Ethan was making dinner. It smelled like garlic and tomatoes, and music was playing softly from the speaker on the counter. Hey, Ethan said, looking up. How was the house? Good. Quiet. You thinking about selling? Maybe. Not yet. But maybe someday. Maya looked up from her homework. Can I have a snack? After you finish your math, Ethan said, but I'm hungry now. Then work faster. Maya groaned dramatically and went back to her worksheet, and Vivian smiled. This was her life now. Homework battles and dinner prep and the comfortable chaos of a family. She'd spent so long thinking she needed to be important, to be indispensable, to leave some kind of mark on the world. But standing here in this small, cluttered kitchen, watching the 2 people she loved most in the world, she realized she'd been wrong about what mattered. It wasn't about building empires or making millions, or proving herself to people who didn't really care. It was about this. These small, ordinary moments that added up to a life. That night, after Maya was in bed and the dishes were done, Vivian and Ethan sat on the back porch of his house, their house now, and looked out at the small yard. It wasn't as grand as Vivian's garden across the street, but it was theirs. They'd planted a few flowers, put in a small vegetable patch, built a swing for Maya. I've been thinking, Vivian said. About? Starting a nonprofit. Something focused on literacy programs for kids. I could use some of the money from selling the company shares to fund it. Ethan looked at her. You want to do that? I think I do. It's not about building something huge or impressive, just something that helps. Something that matters. I think that's a great idea. You don't think it's too small, after running a whole company? I think it's exactly the right size. Vivian leaned into him, and he wrapped his arm around her. They sat there in the quiet, and Vivian thought about everything that had happened over the past year. The breakdown, the rebuild, the slow, painful process of becoming someone new. She thought about her father and how much she missed him. But she also thought about what he would say if he could see her now. And she knew, deep down, that he'd be proud. Not because of what she'd accomplished or how much money she'd made, but because she'd finally learned to choose happiness. Ethan, she said. Yeah? Thank you for fixing my house. He smiled. Anytime. I mean it. If you hadn't come over that day, if you hadn't kept showing up even when I tried to push you away, I don't know where I'd be right now. You'd be fine. You're stronger than you think. Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to find out. They sat there until the stars came out, and Vivian felt a peace she hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. She'd spent so long hiding from life, convinced that if she just stayed small and controlled and safe, she wouldn't get hurt. But she'd been wrong. Safety wasn't in walls or money or success. It was in this, in letting people in taking risks, in choosing love even when it scared the hell out of you. The next morning, Vivian woke up to Maya jumping on the bed. Get up! Get up! Daddy made pancakes! Vivian groaned and pulled the pillow over her head. It's Saturday. I'm sleeping. But they're chocolate chip. Maya, let her sleep, Ethan called from downstairs. But she's going to miss breakfast. Vivian peeked out from under the pillow and saw Maya's face, bright with excitement, and couldn't help but smile. Okay, I'm up. Maya cheered and ran back downstairs, and Vivian got out of bed, pulled on a sweatshirt, and followed her. Ethan was at the stove flipping pancakes, and the whole house smelled like sugar and butter. "Morning," he said, kissing her as she walked past. "Morning." She poured herself coffee and sat down at the table next to Maya, who was already covered in syrup. "Vivian, guess what?" Maya said through a mouthful of pancake. "What?" "I told my teacher you're my mom now." Vivian's hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. "You did?" "Yeah. She asked if my mom was coming to the parent thing next week, and I said yes because you're coming, right?" Vivian looked at Ethan, who was watching her carefully, and then back at Maya. "I'm not technically your mom, sweetheart. But you live here, and you make me lunches, and you read me stories. That's what moms do." Vivian's throat tightened. "Yeah, I guess it is. So you're my mom." It was such a simple statement, delivered with the absolute certainty only a 7-year-old could have. And Vivian realized that Maya was right. It didn't matter that there was no legal paperwork, no official title. She was Maya's mom in all the ways that actually mattered. "Okay," Vivian said softly. "Then, yeah, I'm your mom." Maya grinned and went back to her pancakes like it was the most natural thing in the world. And maybe it was. Ethan came over and kissed the top of Vivian's head. "You okay?" he whispered. "Yeah," she said, and meant it. "I really am." Later that day, Vivian went back to her old house one last time. She walked through the empty rooms, remembering the person she'd been when she lived here. Scared, lonely, hiding from the world. That person felt like a stranger now. She locked the door behind her and called a realtor on her way back to the car. It was time. Time to let go of the past and fully embrace the future she was building. When she got home, and it was home now, fully and completely, Ethan and Maya were in the backyard, working on the garden. She stood at the window watching them for a moment and felt a wave of gratitude so strong it almost knocked her over. This was what she'd been searching for all along. Not success or validation or control, just this. Just love and family and the messy, beautiful chaos of building a life with people who saw her, really saw her, and chose to stay anyway. She walked outside and joined them, kneeling in the dirt beside Maya. "What are we planting?" she asked. "Sunflowers," Maya said. "Daddy says they'll be taller than the house." "I said they might be taller than the house," Ethan corrected. "Same thing." Vivian laughed and picked up a seed. She pressed it into the soil, covered it gently, and thought about how much her life had changed in the past year. She'd lost a company, a title, a relationship with her mother, her carefully constructed identity. But she'd gained so much more. A family, a purpose, a sense of peace she hadn't known was possible. And as she knelt there in the dirt with the two people she loved most in the world, planting seeds that would grow into something beautiful, Vivian finally understood something her father had tried to tell her years ago. Success wasn't measured in money or power or achievement. It was measured in moments like this, in choosing happiness over obligation, in building a life you actually wanted to live instead of one that looked good from the outside. It was measured in the people who loved you, the lives you touched, and the courage it took to keep showing up even when you were scared. And by that measure, Vivian Hale was finally truly successful. She looked up at Ethan and caught him watching her, a small smile on his face. "What?" she asked. "Nothing, just thinking about how lucky I am." "I'm the lucky one. We're both lucky." Maya looked up from her planting. "Can we be done now? I want to go inside and draw." "Almost done," Ethan said. "Just a few more seeds." They worked together until all the seeds were planted, then went inside to wash the dirt off their hands. And as Vivian stood at the sink with Maya beside her, chattering about the picture she was going to draw, she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Content. Not the restless, striving kind of contentment that came from achieving goals, but the deep, settled kind that came from being exactly where you were supposed to be. That night, after Maya was asleep and the house was quiet, Vivian and Ethan lay in bed talking about the future, about the nonprofit she wanted to start, about maybe getting a dog, about small, ordinary dreams that felt bigger and more important than anything she'd ever accomplished in a boardroom. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked. "Giving up the company?" Vivian thought about it. "No, I regret how long it took me to do it, but I don't regret the choice." Good. Do you ever regret letting me into your life? It's been kind of chaotic. The best things usually are. Vivian smiled and curled into his side. I love you. I love you too. And as she drifted off to sleep, Vivian thought about how strange and wonderful life was. How you could spend years building walls to keep yourself safe, only to discover that the best parts of life existed on the other side of those walls. How you could lose everything you thought mattered and find out you didn't need any of it. How you could be completely broken and still find a way to be whole. She'd started this journey thinking she needed to be fixed, but she'd ended it realizing she was never actually broken. She was just human, flawed and scared and doing her best. And that was enough. It had always been enough. She just needed someone to show her that. Someone to sit with her in the darkness and remind her that morning always came. Someone to love her not in spite of her mess, but because of it. And she'd found that. In the most unexpected place, with the most unexpected person. A contractor who fixed houses for a living and ended up fixing her instead. Or maybe she'd fixed herself. Maybe Ethan had just held up a mirror and helped her see what was possible. Either way, she was here now. Safe and loved and building a life that felt real. And that, Vivian thought, as sleep finally pulled her under, was the truest kind of success there was. Sonnet 4.4